So we take the refuges and precepts, which are really an integral part of one's individual commitment to practice. The whole foundation of Buddhist practice is based on virtue, morality, truthfulness, honesty, all the wholesome qualities that we try and cultivate as good people. And making that commitment in a sort of collective, formal way just helps reinforce and remind us that we are actually aligning ourselves to a way of life which is conducive to enlightenment and compassion and well-being. Having taken the refuges and precepts, we will have a period of meditation, a time to basically just sit quietly, witness whatever we happen to be experiencing, and as it were, try and identify, recognize that inner place of stillness and quiet that we all have, but which gets clouded up and filled up with all the busyness of our life, our concerns, our likes and dislikes, and actually is an essential part of our mindfulness practice, but in a more formal, focused way to help cultivate attention in the present moment. The first part of that will be guided a little bit, and then there'll be a part when it'll just be silent. But there will be some pointers at the beginning and as well during the sitting. I will then offer a few reflections and engage in any conversation, questions that may come up, and it'll be open to the floor so that we all feel that we're participating in a shared event. Not just my voice, but your voices as well. And then we'll finish around 8 o'clock with a closing homage. And so that's basically the outline of the evening. If you do have any questions, do make a note for yourself if you want to keep them till later, and I'll answer them as best I can. I think that covers the main points. I'll just say a little bit about the class itself, what the principle is behind it. Basically, formal classes, meeting like this on a weekly basis, is basically to punctuate our life with a space and a time to address the sort of more broad, wide-ranging issues of life, existential issues. Who are we? What are we about? What can we do to actually realize our true nature and find peace and happiness in a world which seems to have a great absence of peace and happiness, a lot of suffering in the world. And how to relate to that, of course, is one of the challenges that we confront as we try and reconcile all the conflicting demands that life makes on us. And actually, I have found, and many people have found, that the Buddhist principles and teachings are an invaluable aid to making sense of one's life in the biggest and most important way possible. Even as we sit right now, we can notice the silence of the pauses in between my words. And we can notice that we're very aware of the silence as well as of the words. And that's what all this practice points to, is this remarkable quality we have of being present. And learning to identify and recognize and witness this ever-present moment of background stillness helps us to tease apart the thought stream with all the feelings and sensations that accompany our thoughts from our experience of them in terms of our awareness. And we'll probably say a little bit more about that later on. So there is a formal side to this part of the evening. I will turn to the shrine behind me, where you see a Buddha Rupa, which is a stone, in this case, representation of the Buddha. When we bow to the Buddha, we're not bowing to either the stone We're not even necessarily bowing to the historical individual who was called, or who was, yes, called and referred to as the Buddha or the awakened one. We're actually bowing to what that figure represents, which is an enlightened state of mind, which is posited in the Buddhist tradition as being a potential that we can all realize. So we're actually surrendering, you could say, to use sort of AA terminology, surrendering or bowing to a higher power, but we're not calling that higher power God. We're not even necessarily calling it, but basically an enlightened frame of mind or state of mind, which is quite timeless, difficult to put into words because it's essentially an experience, an insight, which comes with practice. So that's the first bow. The second bow, we bow to the Dhamma. Now, the Dhamma has many, many meanings. It's a very broad-ranging word. It is essentially, in the broadest sense of the word, it's the way things are. So we're bowing to reality, the way things are. And we'll talk about how that translates into a conceptual framework. So just to give ourselves an idea, at least, of how reality is understood from a Buddhist perspective, an insightful perspective. The word Dhamma also refers to the teachings. So although one can strictly define it as just Buddhist teachings, I like to expand that meaning to mean any teachings that lead to greater happiness, true well-being, insight and understanding and compassion, I see as pointing in the right direction and being Dhamma teachings, teachings of universally true teachings. They manifest in many traditions, in many lives of many individuals, but essentially they're all pointing to the same truth. So anything that is conducive to wholesome states of mind and insight and understanding, I classify and see as the Dhamma. Purists will narrow it down to the vast body of collected works that have come down in the Buddhist tradition from the Buddha's days. The third bow that we take or make or choose to is to the Sangha. That's really a word with a capital S, which refers to those enlightened beings who, as it were, inspired by the Buddha's teachings, have come to their own individual realization. But in its broader sense, it also means those on the path, the same path that we're on, which is essentially, as I understand it, a path of inquiry. It's not a path of belief, blind belief, or trust. Trust may be a bit closer to it, but people who are working on themselves, who have seen through the superficiality of many of the values that society has, the transient nature of the things that we have, and basically a questioning life and the meaning and the purpose of life, and on a path of awakening, one hopes. So that refers to the community. We're creating a small Sangha in our meeting this evening, where we're collectively going to be sitting together and sharing our reflections as the evening goes on. So those are the three refuges, and the precepts are very, very simple. Basically a foundation, a platform from which to live one's life. They can be sort of chanted formulaically. At the same time, there's something far more to them than just going through a formula of chanting. It's about committing to harmlessness, in other words, being very mindful of how one uses one's body and mind in relationship to other living beings, not only in terms of their physical well-being, but just generally. And that extends to respecting them physically, in sexual behavior. It refers to speaking the truth. It refers to avoiding intoxicants and mind-altering drugs to keep sort of clarity of mind. And also, I should have mentioned the second precept, which is respecting people's property. So basically, they work on several levels, these precepts. They work on a social level in helping sort of outline basic principles of how we can coexist with others. But on a more profound level, the way we live our life in daily life, the morals, the ethics we lead our life by, have a profound effect on how we feel about ourselves. If we're leading a dissolute life, drinking, taking advantage of other people in one form or another, we don't sleep that well. So to have a clean conscience, feel good about oneself, leading a good life helps one feel good about oneself. There are fewer regrets, less remorse, one does one's best, and hopefully one's also forgiving of one's shortcomings. So that says a little bit about the 5 precepts, which I will chant and also repeat in English. I will do the chanting in Pali this evening, which is a sort of jump into the deep end for some of you perhaps. Pali is the language in which most of these teachings were communicated in the very, very early years, and has stayed as a language in its own right. The translation actually won't be available because it'll be screen shared. Unfortunately, we can't chant together because chanting together doesn't work on Zoom. Unfortunately, it creates a cacophony of noise, which makes it not really enjoyable to listen to. So you'll just be hearing my voice. But Wendy, who is hosting this meeting on behalf of the Buddhist Society, will be screen sharing the chant. So if you wish, you can follow the words, even though they are in Pali, on the screen. And there, he's just about to do it. There we go. So that's the dedication of offerings in Pali. I'm tempted to ask Wendy actually to put it into the English and Pali version. Wendy, is that possible to change that? Can you change that to 2 and 3, pages 2 and 3, so that even as I chant the Pali, there'll be an English translation below it. So in fact, we might switch it all into English and Pali. I'm sorry for this late change, Wendy, I hope you don't mind. So we'll be doing pages 2 and 3, and then we'll go to page 128. So we'll just do the dedication of offerings and the preliminary homage. I'll say just a few words about these. These words are traditional words. They might sound a bit archaic and a bit strange. If one is very secular-minded, it might raise a few questions. There's nothing obligatory about this. This is purely optional, but it gives you a flavor of not only how one is making a commitment and putting that into words, it also has a devotional side to it, which is something that just comes with practice and with time. It's not something that you should feel bad about or guilty about or even necessarily reject. So if you have your doubts about it, go into the sort of, what should we say, as a scientist's objective sort of witnessing of a ritual and a rite that you may have your doubts about, but you've got an open mind to listen to. A sort of a sociological perspective. What is this all about? So this is really an inquiry, a questioning of life and values, and this is just one way of finding a way to peace. So I will turn to the shrine here behind me. I will light the candle. I won't light any incense because I tend to react to incense. The incense generally represents the spreading, the dispersal of teachings as it moves through the atmosphere. The small little green shoots behind represent beauty and transience, and the candle that I'm going to light represents light. So those are again symbolic, devotional sort of little elements which help create a context for us to practice in. So that's quite a lot of words to start off with, but being an introductory evening, you'll hopefully forgive them. We will be having some silence soon, so we'll just go through the dedication of offerings in English and in Pali, and I'll just pay my respects to the shrine, towards the shrine. As I mentioned before, all the bowing and chanting is quite optional. Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho. To the Blessed One, the Lord, who fully attained perfect enlightenment. Swakato yena bhagavata dhammo, to the teaching which he expounded so well. Supatipanno yasa bhagavato savaka sangho, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Tamayam bhagavantam sadamam sasangham, to these the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Ime hisakare hiyataraham aropite hi abhiku chayama. We render with offerings our rightful homage. Sadhu no bhante bhagava suchira parini putopi. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, Pachima Janata Nukampamanasa, still had compassion for later generations. Ime sakare dugatapana karabhute patikanhatu. May these simple offerings be accepted. Amhakam digaratam hitaya sukhaya, for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one. Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammam Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami, I bow to the Sangha. I'll now chant the preliminary homage. Annamayam Buddhasa Bhagavato Kubabhaganamakaram Kramase. Now let us pay preliminary homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. We now go to page 128. We'll take the three refuges. When we chanted the preliminary homage, we'll go straight to the Buddham Saranam Gacchami, the third paragraph down. Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. To the Buddha, I go for refuge. To the Dhamma, I go for refuge. The Sangha, I go for refuge. Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami, For the second time to the Buddha, I go for refuge. For the second time to the Dhamma, I go for refuge. For the second time to the Sangha, I go for refuge. Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. For the third time to the Buddha, I go for refuge. For the third time to the Dhamma, I go for refuge. For the third time to the Sangha, I go for refuge. Then move down to the 5 precepts, halfway down the page. Anatipata Verimani Sikhapadam Samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Verimani Sikhapadam Samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu me chachara verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada verimani sikhapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Surameraya Majja Pamadatana Verimani Sikhapadam Samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani Pancha Sikhapadani Silena Sukatimyanti Silena Bhogasampada Silena Nikutimyanti Tasma Silam Pisodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we bow 3 times. So having that formal taking of the refuges and precepts just helps establish and remind us of some of the values that we hopefully try and live our life by. And, it's quite a different feeling doing this collectively and chanting together and hearing others chant. One of the shortcomings of Zoom that we can't do it collectively. But, just say a little bit about the chanting as well. Chanting together is a way of attuning ourselves to a group process. Just a football crowd chants together in support of their team. Here we are chanting together in support of goodness and well-being and a practice that supports it. So we'll now have a period of quiet sitting, half an hour or so. If you'd like to make yourselves comfortable on your cushions, on your chairs. These periods of quiet are really a time to reflect, time just to be present and to be still. So we tend to find a posture that helps us stay awake, which means an upright posture. Shoulders relaxed, but chest not too collapsed, so that the spine is nice and upright. And feeling grounded on the cushion and comfortable. Just being still physically tries to echo or reflect the inner stillness that we all have a potential for. If you do get very uncomfortable, you can adjust your posture. try and keep it to a minimum, just as a personal practice. There's enough suffering in our lives without adding to it by forcing ourselves to sit in great pain or discomfort, so that's best avoided. We have this unique ability, capacity to witness and be present to whatever we're experiencing. What we often start noticing when we start practicing is that our minds jump around from one topic to another very quickly. It's a very simple solution to that, is to accept that that's normal. There's nothing wrong with it. What we try and do is just to come back to the present moment and not get lost in the content of our thoughts. Our attention gets hijacked by the contents of our awareness, the narratives and stories and memories and imaginations that the mind throws up. And we try and come back into the present moment by focusing on what is present, and our bodies are present. So we use our bodies as a reference point, like an anchor, just noticing the sensations of breathing, of being, of sensing with the body. And that tends to bring us back and out of the story that we might get caught up in. So the breath is a good starting point to begin meditating with, noticing the inhalation, the flow of air through the nostrils, down the windpipe, through the heart region into the lungs, pressing down on the diaphragm, and the exhalation which follows. So we just track the flow of air, inhalation, momentary pause, exhalation. If we find that we have a lot of tension in the body, not having unwound after the day's duties, it's nice to imagine that this exhalation is like a moment of relaxation, of letting go, while still maintaining an upright posture, but not a forced one, just upright. Pausing for a second or two at the end of the out-breath can be very calming and very soothing. It just helps promote a sense of relaxation into the present moment. If you've had a long and tiring day and feeling very sleepy, it might be not advisable to close your eyes. You might prefer to sit with your eyes just partially open, just to let a bit of light in and stay present. Otherwise, having eyes closed helps keep out external stimuli in terms of data coming in through the eyes. It allows one to notice the inner workings of the mind and heart. Because attention, when we're sitting in practice like this, is guided inwards, directed inwards. So it's nice to know that whilst we're alive, we're breathing, which we take for granted. A lot of the time we don't even notice that we're breathing. But here we're using our breathing, the breath, as a point of attention, something to notice. Our general tendency when we have nothing to do is to fill our time up with some sort of activity, whether it be checking in on our smartphone, checking into our emails, or reading something. So it can feel a little bit strange, but uncomfortable, even just to sit in silence and not do anything proactively except just be present. So being present means noticing the sensations of the body, the quality of those sensations in terms of what we feel, feelings that we're having in the body are present or unpleasant or neutral. Noticing our state of mind, whatever it might be, happy, unhappy, sad, pleasant, unpleasant. So it's our mind or mood state. And noticing the thoughts that are flowing through the mind. And it's just about acknowledging that how it is for us in the moment. So we can say to ourselves that right now it's just like this. So cultivating a disposition of acceptance of how it is. One important quality which helps in our practice of being present is patient endurance. Just being patient. Take into account how much activity the brain's been engaged in just in today, let alone the lifetime that we've had. It's not surprising that it's still churning away, producing mental matter. So observe it arise, notice it, but don't engage with it. Just allow it to pass through as we breathe in and breathe out. It's very easy to be self-critical, frustrated with ourselves, angry even with ourselves. So we have to learn how to cultivate understanding, a kind disposition towards ourselves, not to be too self-critical. It doesn't help. Nobody benefits. We're dealing with a lifelong habit of thinking, which isn't going to change in just a short period of sitting. It will stop being an issue when we wake up to a spacious mind, an open mind, which is unaffected by the contents of the mind. And that does take a bit of practice sometimes, usually, more often than not. Nice thing about sitting quietly is that we don't have to be anybody. We don't even have to be a meditator. All we're doing is just being in a sitting position and witnessing the breath, body sensations, the thoughts and feelings that arise and pass through our present moment awareness. Noticing the breathing, the flow of air through the nostrils, windpipe, lungs and belly, and then the exhalation, relaxing, letting go. So knowing this moment just as it is, life as it is just now. So just relaxing, letting go of any judgments, opinions about oneself or others. Creating a field of well-being and kindness towards oneself and towards others. Forgiving other people's shortcomings as we would like our own shortcomings to be forgiven and accepted. An appreciation of all the good things that have happened in our life. We may have had many tragedies, sadnesses, but also been good things. Everything in life is a cause and effect. We are the product of cause and effect. We can change what we've inherited, becoming more conscious, more aware of the consequences of our actions and words. Noticing how we're feeling, what's our relationship to our sitting at the moment. And as I ring the bell, you may just hear it for a second before Zoom cuts it out. We can slowly start opening our eyes and noticing the transition from silent, internally focused attention to the colors of the room or space we're in, texture of floor, walls, furniture. Noticing and observing our different state of mind, having sat quietly for almost half an hour, just noticing the effect that has on how we feel within ourselves, about ourselves. And generally speaking, most of us will find that we feel quieter, feeling a bit more present, greater aware of the stillness around us. Tend to find we have a more spacious state of mind. Some of us, on the other hand, may have had stuff come up, unfinished business, memories, disappointments, sadnesses, but hopefully they won't feel as intense. One of the key characteristics of existence, of being, is the transient nature of all phenomena. Everything changes as conditions change, so our experiences change. But what doesn't change is our ability to witness. So the emphasis of our practice is on present moment awareness, which is always present, always constant. We just get flooded out or taken over by what arises in our consciousness. So a regular practice such as the one we've just done allows us to get caught up and disengage from these repeated waves of thoughts, memories, narratives. And after a while, we start being able to find that center point of just bare attention, non-judgmental awareness. With time, with reflection, with practice, we start recognizing that that's the only constant that we have. Everything else comes and goes, which on one level might feel a bit frightening, unsettling, but actually is where we find liberation, find true peace. All of us, without exception, can tune into this present moment experience. Whatever we're experiencing, we can say, I am experiencing, I am feeling this, I am feeling that. I'm having a memory. But what is this I am that is knowing all these things? It's not an I, it's just presence, it's just awareness. But we immediately link our awareness to what we're aware of. And that's where all the trouble starts. We identify with the contents of our awareness. And that's how the I, me, and mine arises, relating everything to this sense of identity that we've been conditioned to have. So we want to go beyond the conditioning and go to the witnessing, which is quite like a mirror, impartial. And eventually, with practice, with good foundations in our life, we find that that mirror mind, that still mind is always present. And in fact, it's the only thing that's real. And that's where we find peace. So these reflections of mine are really for consideration, for our individual reflection. Because the truth of the way things are can only be discovered and realized individually. And that's what a true inquiry is about, being open-minded, hearing thoughts or ideas or teachings, reflecting on them, pondering, and exploring them for oneself, checking them out, not just accepting them with blind faith. That's why this practice in the Buddhist tradition is such a mature one. I wonder if any of you have any questions or anything's that might have come up for you that might be good to share or ask. Certainly can't promise to give you the right answer, but we can certainly collectively consider whatever has come up for anybody. So do feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask something or make a point which might be helpful to share for yourself or for others. It's always good to ask questions because if you don't ask, you don't find out. And one often finds that the questions that are asked are often not just the questioner's question. It can often benefit other people to both hear the question articulated and reflect on whatever the answer might be. But we can also sit in silence, so there's no pressure.
Nick, this is Susan here.
Yes.
I wanted to say thank you very much for your preliminary remarks. The way in which in about 20 minutes you seem to have put the essence of whatever kind of Buddhism it is we're following, and sort of in a nutshell. And it's very helpful because there is so much to read, to learn. There has been so much written in so many different ways and traditions. And sometimes I just don't know what I should be reading next. And one can sometimes lose sight of the essence of what it is that we are doing. So I wanted to thank you for doing that in such, I mean, you always speak very eloquently and simply and to the point, and I thought you did it beautifully. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's essential to keep practice uncomplicated. As you say, there's so much out there, not only on the web, but in libraries, so many teachers, teachings, it can get quite overwhelming. And I think it's important to keep on coming back to the simplicity of practice. That's one thing I've really benefited from the teachings of Ajahn Chah, because he just taught the Four Noble Truths, which actually encompasses everything. And I seem to recollect even from the Buddha's life, when he was teaching his son, he was just saying, just practice of the precepts, and everything will fall into place. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, he didn't quite use those words, but something on those lines. And the beautiful thing about this constant reminding of coming into the present moment, we're talking about the present moment as we are experiencing it in the moment. And that's usually very simple. What happens in the present moment? We have an experience of our bodies. We have an experience of the sensations that are arising in the body, whether we're in a conversation or not in a conversation. And it's just being with the immediacy of the moment. And then as stuff arises in our responses or reactions to what we're experiencing, we have this capacity to know what's happening. And if we don't know, all we have to do is stop, pause. Because every time we pause, we're creating a bit of space around what's happening. And that's essentially what our practice of sitting quietly is about. It's about creating a pause and just going into a witnessing, observing. And whatever opinions we have, we can actually classify them and see them as an opinion, as a point of view, but not believe in it as an absolute truth. Because the only truth is what we're experiencing. But it's the contents are constantly changing, value judgments are constantly changing, but our awareness of them is always present. So the whole emphasis of the practice is just to be awake to the present. And the Five Precepts help us in that, because they help us not to distort or confuse or complicate situations which are already probably often enough more than complicated. So it's keeping it really simple. And what's the simplest thing of all is just basically just sitting, breathing. What can be simpler than that? And yet what we find is these floods of memories, of narratives, of points of view, of likes and dislikes. And what we're doing is weaning ourselves off this relentless diet of mental and emotional proliferation, trying to come to the simplicity of just simply being. And in that state of being, noticing all that arises as it comes and goes, and allowing it to go, not holding on to it. So it's really a very, very internal process. And it's very easy to become judgmental, which is why having a kindly disposition towards oneself is so helpful. There's no point in castigating ourselves that I shouldn't be thinking this, I should be doing that. The shoulds can be really put to one side, And we just go, what's the experience? Well, if the experience is all these shoulds, well, then you just notice that shoulds are coming up. But don't believe them as an absolute truth. There's just a should, which is coming from a conditioned perspective. You should be like this, you should do that. Part of upbringing is you shouldn't do this, you should do that. So there are plenty of shoulds, but we can actually step aside and just observe the shoulds coming and realize that we do have the potential for a perspective that can just witness and observe this process. But the witnessing itself is not passing a judgment on what's happening. It's just noticing it, not getting embroiled in a battle. Because the moment we get caught up in a battle, we complicate things. It creates discord, disharmony. We don't want any battles. We just want to find a still place of witnessing. And this element of kindness and understanding basically is not just romantic fiction. It's not just a sort of la-la land response. Why are we the way we are? Because of our experiences, because of the conditions we've experienced. If we look at any act, whether it be skillful or unskillful, there's usually a story to it somewhere in terms of cause and effect. So we're brought up to believe in our separate identity. We need to have a sense of separateness in order to navigate the world, but actually it's a construct. We're not separate. We're an integral part of the universe. We're an integral part of this world. We've evolved out of nature has produced us. And all the habits and patterns we have, we've had them taught to us, we've learned them, we've cultivated them ourselves, not even knowingly often. So we're the inheritors of all our past actions and conditions. And our task, if one can call it a task, our job to be happy, is just to step a little bit aside from that, create a bit of space around it. And with the sort of pointers that I may be offering or other teachers may be offering, just to observe and see what the consequences are of skillful actions, what the consequences are of unskillful actions, and learn from our moment-by-moment experience of life. What happens when we get angry? We're usually pointing a finger, blaming somebody for something that isn't just or isn't right. Well, that can be known, but it doesn't have to be acted on. So what we're cultivating is some restraint, informed by an intuitively wiser and kinder understanding. And the beautiful thing about this approach is that it works. It's often slow, but it basically changes the territory of our experience. And as we start being present to all our happy and unhappy, our easy and our difficult states of mind, we start cultivating an all-encompassing, all-inclusive presence of awareness, which allows all this material to come to the surface, express itself in whatever way we feel intuitively is the best way to communicate it, and find some peace in the process. So ultimately, it leads to a state of non-judgmental acceptance. It doesn't mean that we don't have opinions. It doesn't mean that we don't pass judgment on people, because we often automatically do that. We just don't have to believe in the absoluteness of the judgment or the opinion we might have. So even when we do have a judgment or a point of view which is very strong, we're still capable of recognizing judgment, opinion. So we practice stepping out of it. At the same time, we have to respond to the situations we find ourselves in. And the precepts are essentially a wholesome way of how to relate to the environment, to other people, based on truthfulness, on respect, and on kindness. Those are, they're not sort of taught as three principles. They're certainly the way I would articulate and draw out what I have learned. Those key things: truthfulness, respect, and kindness. Now, this truthfulness has to also be a reflective truthfulness. What am I experiencing? Oh, a very unpleasant state of mind, right? Accept it. That's what's happening. Or it might be a beautiful state of mind. Accept it. That's beautiful. So being truthfully self-reflective is key. Being truthful in our communication to others is also key. Because if we have untruthful communication, we're distorting reality, distorting what's happening in a way which is manipulating the situation to somebody's advantage at somebody else's cost, which isn't a skillful way to live life. So being truthful towards oneself and towards others is, I see, as a fundamental ingredient of a truthful, sincere inquiry into life and into existence and into what we are or think we are. Respect is also very important. What does respect mean? It means accepting the limitations that we have personally and that others have personally. It's respecting people's integrity. It's respecting them as individuals and ourselves as individuals with all our faults and strengths. So it actually reflects a sort of consideration and an understanding response. It's very easy to pass judgment. It's not always so easy to receive those judgments, whether one be some other person has to receive our judgment of them or whether we have to receive their judgment of ourselves. So it's about not passing judgment, but respecting and working on the assumption that most of us are trying to do the best that we can. We just sometimes don't know what that best thing is to do. So there's sometimes a lot of confusion around it. But I find the third principle of being kind to oneself and kind to others really, really helpful. Because in kindness, there's a sense of forgiveness, a sense of understanding, a sense of acceptance. And we all respond to understanding. If someone shouts at us or passes judgments on us, we immediately cringe, contract, and try and sort of push it away. But if someone has a kindly disposition, it lowers our defenses. It makes us more accepting, more understanding. It creates a kinder relationship, which is more conducive and more skillfully conducive to change for the better. So these are very simple principles if you think of them, and you have to relate them to your immediate experience. What's happening to me right now? What am I doing? And if I don't know, best thing is just to pause and say, right, pause, 3 breaths, 10 breaths, 20 breaths, just stay present. Because each one of us has an intuitive wisdom as to what's right and what's wrong. We just have to allow it to manifest. And too much thinking, too much worry, too much stress, too much anxiety confuses and complicates and prevents that natural intuitive wisdom of what's right and wrong to manifest. So meditation practice is not just about sitting still. It's about being still. It's about finding that place of stillness, truthfulness, and kindness, which is quite transformative for the better. Not only our own betterment, but at the same time, everybody's betterment. Because whatever we do with ourselves, we're doing to the world, and likewise for others. So those are a few reflections that come to mind in response to what you just said. We still have a few minutes if anybody else would like to say something or contribute something to this evening's gathering or meeting. You're very welcome to. Another thing that comes to mind as we're sitting here is that our practice to become better, to become more insightful, more compassionate, and more understanding is our contribution to the world. It's our gift to the world. So we can be aware of what are we giving the world. If we're giving the world truthfulness, kindness, and respect, what a wonderful gift it is for the world to receive in just the small everyday interactions of life, whether it be with shopkeepers, fellow passengers on the train, fellow pedestrians in the street, our family members. There's so much aggravation, so much aggression and division and hatred and judgment. The world doesn't need any more of that. We don't need any more of that. What we want is compassionate or kind understanding, something that allows us to relate to the world where everybody's a brother and a sister. That means practicing forgiveness, understanding, tolerance, not being harshly judgmental, yet at the same time being respectful of values that are conducive to wholesome states of mind and heart. It's not dramatic. It won't necessarily hit the headlines on the news at 10, but it might affect a lot of people in little small ways, which can change other people as well. So I think what I'll do is I'll just suggest a closing chant. We were going to do the, I was going to do the sharing of blessings, I think. Let me just see which one we'll go to. I'll just look it up in the book as to what page to ask Wendy, our kind co-host or primary host. I think what might be nice to chant, Wendy, if you're listening, is instead of 41, reflection on universal well-being, perhaps we can chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness on page 37. Is that possible? Thank you so much. That's great. It's a beautiful chant, which I'll have to do solo, but you're very welcome to join in if you wish by following the text on the screen share. This is literally the words that the Buddha spoke and were recorded by his followers. Now let us chant the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, So with a boundless heart, should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. I find that's a chant worth learning off by heart, and just reflecting on. It's a beautiful set of sentiments, cultivating a disposition of kindness towards oneself and the world. Very, very precious. Our time is gradually coming to an end. In fact, we've just passed the 8 o'clock mark, so running over a little bit. I hope that doesn't disrupt your evening's schedule too much. I'd just like to say, just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, that next week there is no class. There'll be a class the week after, on the 26th, which we're going to hopefully do a hybrid class. It'll be our first Theravada hybrid class, where Martin and I will be at the Buddhist Society in Eccleston Square, and we'll see how we go with seeing people face to face in person after 2 or 3 years, or whatever it is, and also on Zoom, and see how the two go together. Hopefully they'll go hand in hand, and we'll see how that goes. I'd also like to mention, if you're interested in having a sort of day retreat or a day of practice, the Amaravati Lay Buddhist Association is putting on a day next Saturday, which starts at 9:30 in the morning and finishes about 4:30. It's more of the same, and yet quite different in terms of being in the moment. It'll be different, but basically it'll be a day committed to practice, some sitting, some walking, reflections, and time spent together. And the theme is, don't take yourself too seriously. That's the theme. And I'll actually be leading it, so if you're not tired of my voice, you can hear more of me next Saturday. Okay, so I'd like to conclude the evening by thanking Wendy for supporting the event, today's class, and we'd like to do the evening closing homage, which I think is on page 28. Is it 28? Oh, that's the evening one. I think we need to go to the closing homage on page 16, Wendy, I'm sorry, which is so that for those who are unfamiliar with the Pali, we can, thank you very much, you're very efficient with those screen shares. So I will ring the bell to conclude the class, and then we'll do the closing homage. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhamma Namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sangham Namami. I bow to the Sangha. Well, that concludes our evening. I wish you all a good evening and a good week ahead, and look forward to seeing you either on Saturday or Monday week. Monday 2 weeks, actually, Monday 2 weeks. No class next week. There is a Saturday to make up for it. So I'll say goodbye